a lot of the discussion about architecture is ephemeral, because we have these stars, star architects, and their buildings are only discussed in terms of their image and their surface.
Visual.
Yeah.
Illusion.
Yeah. I had this astonishing experience. I was invited to go on a special sort of visit to South Korea, to Seoul, and we were taken to see these 3 buildings which were built by the Samsung Corporation. So the Samsung Corporation wanted to create a cultural center, so they thought they would get the 3 most famous architects they could think of in the world, and each would do one part of it. So one was Mario Botta from Italy, one was Rem Koolhaas, and the third was Jean Nouvel. And I had to write an article about, I was invited to write an article for a magazine in Singapore, and I said, this is like the Three Tenors, you know, Pavarotti and Placido Domingo. So you sent these three star architects, they've been put on the top of a hill, and they're all singing away, and they're not listening to each other. And I mean, and these 3 buildings, they bore no relationship to each other. And that's the star architecture business. If you go back to, say, the Futurist Manifesto and so on, it was anti-history, and in fact the Futurists called for all museums and libraries to be demolished. So, and the modernists were very happy to demolish buildings to make way for their buildings. So the interesting thing is that modernism is not modern. Modernism is now a historical entity, and the modernists want to preserve. But surely if they were true to their ideals, they would be happy. And I mean, the clear thing is, the huge difference between, let's say, India and Britain is that India is still very much a developing country. There isn't a new modern appearing like a knight in shining armor over the horizon. I mean, we're living in a at the moment in a world of, it seems to me, enormous confusion and plurality, which, you know, is, you see this in the politics. And you know, it's not for nothing that the President of the United States is a property developer. That's what his background is. He built Trump Towers. He's a developer, and he has absolutely zero interest in architecture or quality. He just is interested in real estate. So I think that's the world we're living in, and it's affecting India as well, isn't it? Nehru's vision was for a fair and just society. I mean, it's interesting that he chose Le Corbusier, he chose foreign architects, simply because he realized that building, for instance, a city of Chandigarh, immediately you had a communal problem. You know, what style should you adopt? Should it be Hindu? Should it be Mughal? Should it be what? You know, and modernism was secular. Modernism gave him a new architecture which was for everybody. You could say about Le Corbusier's Chandigarh, this is architecture for Hindus, for Muslims, Christians, everybody, because it's got no values to it. I mean, in the history of post-independence India, I mean, there was a sort of idealism at the beginning, and architects felt very much affected by that, because they were at the sharp end of building a new independent country. And at that time, and the same was true in Britain after the Second World War, more than 50% of architects worked in the public service. So architects were not these stars who got mega sums of money to build Trump Tower. They were architects who believed in Nehru's vision of a new India and were working as civil servants in teams without names, and that has all I mean, it's how I started my career. I worked for a new town development corporation. I was a public servant. But if we've got so many architects, why aren't they all screaming about what is happening? And it's not about this hall of whatever being demolished, the Hall of Nations. I mean, that was, to be honest, a pretty ugly sort of building. I'm not sure that I would have. It's not. I mean, that isn't the big issue. Is the quality of our cities and the quality of the spaces. I mean, just this is very pleasant. You know, a tree, a corner, and it's clean, and so on. The shade, and there should be much more of that. And it was about Bauer's staircases, and about the staircases that Bauer studied when he was in Europe. There are very few books just about staircases. You know, nobody's written a book about Charles Correa's staircases or the staircases of Kerala. Or I live in our Swiss house is in a valley, and there are two things that I'm working on. One is I want to write about the history of the 25 churches in our valley, but the other is I'm planning a book about balconies. And this is not in an Indian or an Asian context. It's about living on balconies in Europe. And I think one of the things is that the British have never ever understood about balconies. And in Germany and Switzerland, people have wonderful balconies. And so there is a conversation where two Germans will be talking to each other in the tram. So one will say to the other, "So where are you going for your holidays this year?" "Oh, no, we are going to Mallorca." And then the other said, "Whereabouts are you going?" "Oh, we don't have much money. We're going to Balconia this year." And that means we're staying at home. And people have these incredible balconies.